Welcome, football fans, to another Monday morning reaction. I'm Mitch, here to give you a new, fresh, and loaded NFL mock draft. That's right, we're mocking today. We have a top 10 to do. The top 10 of the NFL draft. We're projecting forward. We're taking a look at the bottom 10 teams in the NFL currently entering NFL Week 18 as Week 17 comes to a close tonight with the Niners and the Lions. And we're going to give you a little mock draft to satisfy your cravings. Yes, I am a fellow down in the dumpster fire of the NFL fan, as I am a Patriots fan. And currently, my New England Patriots hold the first overall pick. And currently, I love Drew Lock. Thank you so much, Drew Lock. I appreciate you. You are my favorite human on earth currently, so thank you so much. New York Giants fans, I feel bad for you, but not really. You stole 2 Super Bowls from us. Let's get to a mock draft, man. The top 10 players, the top 10 teams. Let's break it down. Let us know in the chat what you guys think. Let me know what you think of each selection. This is a mock draft. This is not a dream scenario. So 1 player per team, obviously. I'm looking at the best fits for the team, the roster needs, and the most realistic prospects to land in the top 10. So let's work our way from number 10 up to, I think we're going to work our way from number 10 to number 1. Okay. So let's begin with number 10, reverse order of a typical mock draft. All right. So at number 10, we're going to begin with the New Orleans Saints. They will be selecting a pass rusher, and I think the best fit for them currently is Mykel Williams out of Georgia. Now, the reason I like this fit, first of all, the Saints have needed a pass rusher for what feels like seasons. The last few years, they have not been able to lay a finger on the quarterback. We saw it in prime time against Jordan Love just last week. This past week, they made Aiden O'Connell look like 2007 Tom Brady. So they clearly need a pass rusher. Mykel Williams brings to the table, I think, a moldable, high-ceiling prospect. He's got phenomenal length, phenomenal athleticism. He screams a Georgia prospect that's very similar to the one that went first overall not long ago, Trayvon Walker. A guy with alignment versatility. You could put him inside. You could put him outside as a rusher. He can stand up. He can do a lot of different things. The Saints do have Carl Granderson, who I think is one of the most underrated defensive ends in football, but they need a real stud along the defensive line. Cameron Jordan is getting old. Chase Young is up in terms of his contract. He wasn't very productive for them this season. They could maybe go with more of a pure pass rushing specialist in this spot with James Pierce Jr., but I went with the guy that fits their mold, a guy like Cameron Jordan to replace Cameron Jordan, that length, that size, that versatility. So I like Williams to the Saints at number 10. Shout out to the chat. Thank you guys for joining. Appreciate you. Let's get to number 9. At number 9, the Chicago Bears. The Bears at number 9. I think they could go offensive line or defensive line in this spot. And personally, if I was the general manager of this team, I would probably lean towards picking a defensive lineman. But that being said, I am trying to put myself in the chair of that team and the position that I feel they're most likely to pick. And I think because this team is so driven by Caleb Williams' success, Caleb Williams' ability to lead this team into the future, and because his rookie season was a little rocky throughout, I think they're going to pick an offensive lineman. So I went with Will Campbell, offensive lineman out of LSU. And the reason I list him as an offensive lineman here is because I think he could be a guard at the NFL level, depending on what teams think of his arm length, because that's always a big issue when it comes to guard or tackle. Does he have the arm length to really play on the perimeter of the offensive line? But I just see him as an excellent offensive lineman. And I think when you have a team like the Bears, you just need to add assets to the offensive line. The reason I say I would have added to the defensive line from a personal perspective, and I have this conflict within, is because when you look at the grades of the Bears offensive linemen individually, all three of their interior offensive linemen have all graded inside the top 25 at their position, including both guards, which is impressive, right? That's a number one guard at both spots. And then you look at the tackle spot, and both of them, Braxton Jones and Darnell Wright, who they also selected in the first round, is graded according to PFF as a top 21 tackle. So that's just Pro Football Focus, but it is one measuring stick to understand how good an offensive line is from an individual perspective. And I think their greater scheme issues do lie within the coordination of the offense, within the coaching of the offensive line. And I think that's ultimately what will fix this line for Caleb Williams. But that being said, you can never have enough talented offensive linemen, especially if you feel like this one in Will Campbell can play inside or outside potentially at the NFL level. He's very refined in terms of his hands. He's got an impressive all-around game, and I think his anchor stands out in pass protection. So I like this fit overall as just a player that can help protect the biggest asset, which is Caleb Williams. Nothing else really has to be added. Let's get to number 8. Which is an exciting pick for me. I love this potential fit here. And when I'm thinking about the Raiders, I'm thinking about the legacy, the history. I'm thinking about the lineage of the Raiders. And I'm thinking about Tom Brady coming to the Raiders, being a part owner of the Raiders, and his love of wide receiver play, and Al Davis's love of speed and wide receiver play. And that's why I go with T-Mac out of Arizona. I think they could pick a receiver here. I don't think the Raiders are high enough currently on our mock draft to pick a quarterback. They would have to trade up in the draft for that to happen, in my opinion. So I think the next best thing they can do is select a big-time perimeter X receiver, which I think T-Mac possesses all the skills. He's 6'5", he runs like a gazelle, and he has outstanding catch radius and hands. So I really, really like a potential big-time wide receiver fit with T-Mac. He's smooth. He's fluid. I think what impresses me is his ability to just get down the field in a hurry at that size, right? I wouldn't be shocked if he ran extremely fast and that he actually really helped his stock, because from what I've seen him in his play, not only does he have great awareness and jump ball skills and great catch radius skills, which is great for a perimeter receiver that can help out a quarterback. You just throw the ball up in the red zone. You throw the ball up on third down like Mike Evans. He can snatch that football, but also he can run by people, which is also an extremely scary thought. So he is a complete wide receiver one skill set. Could the Raiders go with a corner here? Sure. Could they go with an offensive lineman? Possibly. I think their O-line is solid. And honestly, the way that O'Connell has played over the last 4 or 5 games that he suited up, I don't think that they would really mind with him going into next season with perhaps a little competition if they can't find that future at quarterback, and maybe looking at quarterback in the year 2026. That's just my opinion. The Raiders also at running back is an interesting one that I did think about. But I also think that running back, I really thought that even somebody like McCormick showed some flashes for the Raiders in that small sample size. And I think running back is just much more replaceable and easier to find than the wide receiver position, like a 6'5" gazelle. So that's just my opinion. Let's check the chat. We've got a few different questions so far that I think are interesting. So let's just take a look. We've got, should the Pats sell the pick? Appreciate all my Pats fans, Pats Nation in the chat. I do think so. So I do think the Patriots should sell the first overall pick in the 2025 NFL draft. I was going to bring that up once we get to their pick. But if I can get a lot of assets, considering that I do not have a great roster, a talented roster, many marquee blue chip talents across the board. And I have a quarterback, most importantly, in Drake May, who we really believe in and think's going to be an absolute stud if he's not already. I would look to sell that pick for wide receivers, offensive linemen, defensive linemen, right? Try to build the team around Drake May for the future and try to get as many high priority, high end picks and selections and blue chip talents as possible instead of just simply one with the first overall pick. And usually that first overall pick is reserved for a quarterback. And at the end of the day, as bad as people are talking about these quarterbacks, man, I still feel like there's going to be one going first or second. So I think somebody is going to fall in love and somebody is going to want to trade with the Patriots if they hold that selection ultimately. Who would you have for the Browns, a quarterback? We're going to talk about the Browns shortly, so just hold on. Are the top quarterbacks busts? I'll talk about that briefly when we get to each one. Thoughts on Carson Beck? Personally, from what I've seen, I don't find him to be attractive as an NFL quarterback. I think he's got a good arm, but I think his decision-making combined with his lack of athleticism and pocket movement does not have me super pumped about his NFL prospects. Jackson Dart for the Giants in a later round. So this is just based on the top 10. We could get to later rounds at a later point. The Giants are going to be really interesting, though, because their fan base is going to be absolutely irate right now with what they just did in beating the Colts. What we got? Any others before we get to the next pick? Should the Browns trade down or take a quarterback? I don't know if they should take a quarterback. I mean, if I were in charge of the Browns, I would probably look to take a quarterback, but one of the top two would definitely have to fall into my lap. I'm not going to try to reach for a quarterback. Trading down would definitely be an option, though. I would definitely consider that. I think that if they can get rid of Deshaun Watson, that is a absolute killer in their organization right now. Niners do not select in the top 10, but I do think the Niners will address the offensive or defensive line. I would probably lean towards the offensive line. What if the Patriots win against the Bills? Then they'll drop. They'll be inside the top 5, confirmed 100%. But I think that they will. I don't know exactly which pick they'll have, but I do think they'll target a wide receiver or a tackle regardless. That's just my opinion on that. Should the Titans take a quarterback? We'll get to that. Let's continue the mock draft, guys. A lot of questions. Love it. Appreciate it. We're going to continue to get this content flowing. So at number 7, we have the Carolina Panthers. And with the Carolina Panthers, the obvious addition had to be on defense. But with what happens earlier in the draft, because we're doing this in reverse order, it's difficult to explain why they couldn't select a pass rusher. We'll get to that. But at number 7, I have cornerback Will Johnson out of Michigan. Now, it does also make sense for the Panthers to pick a corner because J.C. Horn is on thin ice with the team overall from a contract standpoint. He's been good, but he has not been healthy very often. Will Johnson is locked and confirmed as a top 10 prospect in this class, if not only for his incredible size. He's 6'2" at 202, which is rare to find at a top prospect in terms of a cornerback position, right? We saw that with Sauce, but it doesn't happen too often where a corner has this type of physicality, size, and overall length at the position. So I think based on them picking J.C. Horn, even if it was a little bit different of a front office, they like those big physical perimeter corners in Carolina. I could see them picking one right here in Will Johnson, and they just need defense in general. They just need the best defensive player they can find. Their pass rush is pathetic. Their overall defense, you watch them against Tampa Bay, like they were awful, right? They were awful. They could not get to the quarterback, haven't been able to all year. Their run defense has been one of the worst in football. Now, part of that is because they lost their best defensive tackle, right? They lost one of the best run stuffers in football very early in the season. They also tried to replace Brian Burns with somebody like Jadeveon Clowney, and that hasn't exactly worked out either. So But I do think you look at their corner depth chart as well, and they just get shredded, especially by wide receiver 2s and 3s. So I think bringing in somebody like Will Johnson would definitely help that. Just bring in a player that has versatility to play in any system, man or zone, has a lot of familiarity at the college level of playing different coverages, of playing in big games, is a good tackler, is a really good prospect in a class that maybe doesn't have a lot of these physical specimens. You combine that with his IQ and his anticipation, and you potentially have one of the future best corners in football. Corners, by the nature of the position, are always a little bit more dicier than a lot of other positions in terms of projection. But I think Will Johnson definitely, across the board, a lot of experts agree that he is a phenomenal prospect. So I think he will find his way into the top 10, which is also part of my projection. And that's why I think Carolina would land him here at number 7. Okay. At number 6, the New York Jets. Jets. Now, the Jets are interesting because quarterback is certainly not out of the discussion here with the whole Aaron Rodgers fiasco. It can only be simply described as that. But also wide receiver with the whole Garrett Wilson, like, what is going on there situation is also a consideration. And Devontae Adams, I think's contract is up. So wide receiver wouldn't be out of the question. Quarterback is not out of the question, but quarterbacks are going in the top 5. And I don't see a third quarterback that finds its way inside the top 10. So I went with the tackle position because I think this is probably the most realistic option in the top 10 to get a very good prospect for the future. And considering that Fashanu did get injured, as well as the fact that Morgan Moses is 1,000 years old, Tyron Smith is 2,000 years old, the New York Jets need to think about the future of their offensive line. And if I'm the Jets and I'm thinking about the future of my franchise, the future general manager of this team, the future coach of this team, I'm thinking about what the last regime was unable to do, what they were not able to find. And that was a consistent offensive line that could protect Zach Wilson, that could protect Aaron Rodgers. And so I went with Kevin Banks Jr. out of Texas. Kevin Banks Jr. is, I think, the best tackle in the class. And I think he will be seen as that personally. He's very technical. He's smooth as an athlete. He maybe doesn't have the most strength or power in his upper body, which he needs to work on. But I do see him as the guy that has been a 3-year starter, that has enough tools in terms of his feet that will translate to the NFL, and that can help him in the run game and the pass game. And that is the one skill that I think offensive linemen coaches really look for the most. If you've got the feet, you can piece everything else together. And Banks has a ton of experience at a high level of college football. And I think that's what makes him very, very translatable to the top 10 in the NFL draft. So, yeah, Kelvin Banks out of Texas. I've got him as the top tackle in the class, and that's why I'm going to put him to the Jets. I don't know exactly. He'll probably play left tackle. I don't know exactly if he does have that versatility. He could play right. He could play left. But Fashanu is more of a left tackle at Penn State. So I could see him moving to the left and then Banks filling in on the right, which would make sense. So also picking somebody with his versatility to play left or right side, I think would also make sense. So Banks to the Jets from the Longhorns. Entering the top 5. Before we get to the top 5, let's go to the chat once again. The Panthers draft pick. We addressed that, Will Johnson. I also, ideally, so to fill in on the Panthers, ideally, I would go with a pass rusher if I could, but I just see Will Johnson finding his way into the top 10 based on current projection. And, pretty much everybody has him in the top 10. So if that's the case, it's hard to imagine that prospect won't find his way in. And given how many needs they need on defense, I think it's very realistic. Thoughts on Quinn Ewers or Jalen Daniels? From somebody that really watches Texas closely, I am not a huge fan of Ewers. I haven't studied him in depth on tape, but I've seen a lot of Texas games. And to me, I just don't see it. I don't see it from a physical standpoint at an NFL level in terms of, I don't think he has above average arm strength, above average mobility, anything about his game. I think his accuracy, I think he is somebody that is great in that system, great with that team. He's a good leader. He runs the offense well, but whenever he's played top-notch competition, it feels like he does come across as a little bit limited. I would almost compare him as somebody like Brock Purdy, like at the NFL level, where he's got good timing, anticipation, he's smart. But to me, like, I don't think those are things you can count on at the NFL level if you don't have any physical skill that wows you. So that's something that bugs me. Who is the most likely to trade for the number 1 pick? I would probably say the Giants or the Raiders, either one of those teams. And I would probably say the Giants. Could the Jets trade up to number 1 by trading Wilson? So currently the Jets have the 6th pick. Could they trade Garrett Wilson to the Patriots right now? Possibly. That's possible. I don't know. It might actually take a little bit more, to be fair. But considering that the Jets would be willing to trade Garrett Wilson inside the division to Drake May and the Patriots, that would be pretty wild. I'd be open to discussions as a Patriots fan. Giants trade for Fields. They would not have to trade for Fields. Fields is a free agent, I believe, this year. So I don't think they would have to trade for Justin Fields. Pats to trade down for O-line help. Very possible. Very possible. I think if they land somewhere within 5 to 8 or even 5 to 10, offensive lineman is 90% the pick. Maybe they would go with McMillan if he's still there, but I think offensive line has always been more of a priority to the Patriot organization and Patriot way than a wide receiver. As much as I love wide receivers, I think offensive line would probably be the preference overall. Okay, let's get to the next one. Can the Browns get Fields? Yes, every team can get Fields, guys. Justin Fields is going to be affordable next year. He's not going to be the starter in Pittsburgh. It's no chance. I don't see it at all. So he's definitely going to be out there. I think Justin Fields is somebody that sounds good on the surface, sounds alluring, but I think after a few games as a fan, you kind of see all his flaws as a passer. And you're like, oh, yeah, this guy's really athletic and I kind of like him, but he's also very limited. So I think he's like a borderline starter, kind of like high-end backup. He can play a few games for you, maybe a stretch of a season and play well. But I don't think he's necessarily a long-term solution at the quarterback position, personally. Entering the top 5. At number 5, Jacksonville has always been known to love their defensive linemen, especially when it comes to Trent Baalke and his GM tenure, both in San Francisco and Jacksonville. He has always coveted big defensive linemen. So I went with Mason Graham out of Michigan, who I think is the best defensive tackle and widely regarded as the best defensive tackle in the class. Now, could Jacksonville go with a corner here? That is absolutely possible, but just given Baalke's history of understanding what he likes, Trayvon Walker, for example, right? You think back to San Francisco, Aldon Smith, Justin Smith. You think back to the way he built those football teams. And I think Mason Graham is an example of somebody that he would be interested in, because if you look at the defensive line of Jacksonville, sure, they have Josh Allen, they have Trayvon Walker. Those are edge rushers. But in terms of the interior defensive line, they traded Roy Robertson Harris. They've kind of been getting rid of some of these assets. Eric Armstead is extremely old at this point. So I think they would go with someone fresh, someone young, someone that could penetrate from the interior. 6'3", 320. Graham has great quickness. I think his biggest skill is his quickness, his acceleration, his burst, his ability to penetrate from the inside as a pass rusher. Overall, as a run defender, he is good. He's just a little bit more, I guess you would say, like less powerful than like top end Jalen Carter types. But in terms of elite quickness, elite movement skills on the defensive line, I think you can always go in the right direction. You can never go wrong by building a defensive line. If you have Josh Allen, if you have Trayvon Walker, and you have Mason Graham, your defense is most likely going to be good. And if it's not good, your defensive coordinator is the problem, right? Like, could you use some coverage? Sure. But at the end of the day, if your pass rush gets there within 3 seconds, you're good, right? Like, you're going to be good. So yeah, this is a guy that I think has a complete skill set as an interior defensive lineman. The number one skill being he can get to the quarterback and he can disrupt the quarterback and the passer, which is number one in the NFL. And that's why I have Jacksonville, instead of going with a corner, going with an interior defensive lineman. At number 4, this is where we get to the beginning or the end of the quarterbacks in the first 10 picks. I went with, yes, Sanders out of Colorado. Shedeur Sanders out of Colorado. The big name, the big prospect, the big ticket. I'm still putting Sanders here to the Giants, personally. I think when it's all said and done in terms of the process, I'm trying to project forward. I think when it's all said and done in terms of the process, I think there's going to be some teams that prefer Sanders and some teams that prefer Ward. But I think at the end of the day, when I think you turn on the film for Sanders, I think his lack of high-end skill in terms of arm strength and or mobility, I think is going to come back to haunt him. And that's why I think he will be the one to fall more likely. I think NFL teams are more likely to fall in love with the athlete than they are to fall in love with the player that is on paper as like a leader. I love what Sanders brings to the field and off the field. I think he has a great personality and great leadership skills, which is exactly what the Giants need in this transition. He's a big personality, but he's also understood the spotlight his entire life growing up, and that would be absolutely ideal in New York. He can understand the criticism. He has somebody to mentor him there. And I think what I like about his game is his accuracy, his timing, his touch. I think he's got really good, refined mechanics from the pocket, and he chooses to beat you from the pocket. That being said, I am a little worried about his athleticism. I'm a little worried about his ability to operate behind. You know, he's been operating behind terrible offensive line in Colorado, but he's been sacked a ton. He just doesn't have a lot of athletic trait. It's kind of weird to say because this is Deion's son at the end of the day, but he throws on the move well, but he doesn't run well. He doesn't elude well. He's not very elusive. That is something at the NFL level that I think when you look at the best quarterbacks in football, when you look at Josh Allen, when you look at Lamar Jackson, when you look at Patrick Mahomes, when you even look at Joe Burrow, these are all guys that have incredible savvy, elusiveness, and feet. And that's just something when I've watched Sanders, I've never felt like he has. I think he's going to be solid. I think he's going to be a good starter because he has a high floor, in my opinion, because of his brain and because of his accuracy. But I don't see him as being a game-changing, franchise-changing, franchise-altering quarterback, at least at this point. It's very early in the process, especially for me as somebody that's NFL-focused, but that's just the way that I see it right now. So I think there's a lot of good with this pick, but I think there's also a little bit of overrated, I guess you could say, just because of the name. It's a big name, right? So that's the thing you've got to always be careful about at number 4. At number 3, the Cleveland Browns. And guys, we're staying and picking for all of these selections. We're not trading in this mock draft. So could the Browns trade this pick? Definitely possible. But I think it would be extremely intriguing to take Abdul Carter out of Penn State. And the reason I say that is, and I understand this team has Myles Garrett, but do they? Do they have Myles Garrett? Because I don't know about you, but I keep seeing these posts about Myles Garrett's going to go to the Bills. Myles Garrett's going to go to the Chiefs. Myles Garrett's going to leave. Myles Garrett doesn't want to be a Brown. Myles Garrett. So that is part of this pick, but more so, I'm just picking the best defensive player in the draft with the highest ceiling, and I'm going to pair him up with Myles Garrett. Like, at the end of the day, if Myles Garrett is going to stay, I think it's going to be Abdul Carter. That's also the pick. Like, maybe they could go with Mason Graham, but I prefer Carter as a prospect. I watch him and I see a lot of the usage of Micah Parsons. I almost feel like he is Micah Parsons light in a way, which is not a like negative, okay? Because there's not many Micah Parsons that are on earth, okay? Just in terms of the versatility, the explosiveness, the acceleration, the power. he might actually be more powerful than Parsons. This is a guy that, like Parsons, played off the ball to begin his college career and then transitioned to an edge rusher. And I think his edge rush acceleration in terms of the college game, you definitely saw that as more transferable to the NFL level right away, right? Like the thing with Parsons, the reason he fell to like number 10 or whatever he did is because people didn't know if he was a linebacker or an edge rusher. Carter has clearly made that known that he is an edge rusher, right? He can still be an off-ball linebacker because of his incredible explosion, blitzing ability. You know, when you watch him in that regard, he's phenomenal. But also in terms of his pass rushing ability, he has a much deeper bag coming into the NFL. There's much more of a transition that's understood there. That being said, he's a dynamic chess piece with great speed, power, and bend, which is all the ability you look for in a pass rusher. You want to see that ability to get low, to bend the corner. That is, in my opinion, the best trait of an edge rusher. And he's got a pretty good bag of moves considering how short he's been a real edge rusher. So, yeah, I think he's got all the skills, all the abilities to be a potential defensive player of the year candidate. And whenever you can select that at number 3, you go ahead and take that pick. So Abdul Carter out of Penn State to the Cleveland Browns, get him with Myles Garrett, and you've got a terrorizing pass rush for many years to come. Sure, could they go with a quarterback here? Absolutely. But I'm not sure, putting myself in the seat of the Browns, that they will do that considering Deshaun Watson's contract. They might want one more bridge season of rather Deshaun Watson or some sort of Jameis Winston type of option for this team before they go the quarterback route. But that's just my opinion. You may disagree. That's totally fair. So that's number 3. Checking the chat before we get to the top 2. Pats to trade down. Or okay, we already read that one. What are the quarterback prospects for the Browns? I think it will be Ward or it'll be Sanders. Later on, I'm not exactly sure. It depends on where they pick, second round, third round, who is exactly going to be targeted there. Guys, the thing is, we're talking about a mock draft in, December. So much is going to change by the time it comes to March, especially when it comes to the NFL teams getting their hands on these quarterbacks in terms of the study and the film, and so much changes from what the college film guys think and the NFL coaches and NFL GMs think. And so there's a big transition that happens around February and March. So the quarterbacks, it could change. So, I mean, in terms of quarterbacks, I do think the Browns should take a chance on one. I'm not sure exactly who the name is going to be yet, but I do think they should take a chance on one. Whether it's in the first round, the third round, the 7th round, they should at least land a quarterback in this draft. Where will Travis Hunter land? We will get to that. So obviously it'll be the Titans or the Patriots in this mock draft. Alternative places that he could land within the top 10. I think he could land with Cleveland. I think he could land with the Raiders. I think he could land with Jacksonville. I think he could land with the Jets. Pretty much anywhere except for the Giants, I would be pretty shocked. And the Bears, perhaps. Those are the only spots in the top 10 that I don't necessarily see him landing. Will the Titans sign Sam Darnold? I think, hot take, I think Sam Darnold stays with the Minnesota Vikings. The way he played yesterday, how can you argue that he shouldn't be the quarterback of the Vikings for at least 1 or 2 more years? I think it might be more likely that they trade J.J. McCarthy. They might have found Sam Darnold, their franchise quarterback. I mean, especially considering J.J. McCarthy could be the best prospect in this class as a quarterback. I think many would argue that. And he is coming off a major injury. If you could get a first-round pick out of him, I don't see why you wouldn't do it if Sam Darnold is balling out like he is right now. I mean, I don't see how McCarthy personally has a higher ceiling than Sam Darnold is currently playing. I personally think that. So maybe I'm crazy, but in terms of the places he could go, though, I think Raiders and the Titans would be the top of the list. I for sure would agree with that. Do you think Sanders falls to 4? I think he definitely could. That's why I have him at number 4. Where do I think Genty is going to go? That's a good question. A lot of people have him in Dallas, when I'm thinking about NFL teams that could use a running back, I think the Raiders would maybe be the highest that he would go. I guess the Raiders could be a place just because they don't really have a confirmed good running back. Just thinking off the top of my head at the running back position, I don't think he would land in the NFC East other than the Cowboys. NFC North, the Bears would be interesting, but I think they signed Swift to like a 3-year contract. It wouldn't really make sense to pick a running back. I don't really see, I mean, the Vikings, if somehow they could get their hands on him because Aaron Jones is an older guy. So maybe the Vikings, but that would involve falling in the draft for a lot of people. Obviously not the Lions or the Packers, the NFC South. Kamara is still there, but he's getting older. Tampa's got 3 running backs. Carolina, they drafted one, although he tore his ACL, and Hubbard's really good. So NFC South, Atlanta's got Bijan. I don't really see that. NFC West, some people are like Niners. No, that's not going to happen. Rams is not going to happen. Cardinals, I don't think it's going to happen. They just re-signed James Conner. You go through Kenneth Walker's on, where could he go? Buffalo likes their running back. New England, if they get 2 first-round picks, is possible. Given how Stevenson has played lately, I think that's possible. The Jets have a running back. The Bills have a running back. Just going down the list, the Patriots, I guess, are possible to throw them out there. The Browns, if they had 2 first-round picks, maybe, because Nick Chubb's getting old and he's getting injured. Anyone else? Just thinking fast here. Kansas City, if they could somehow get their hands on him, maybe trade up even. That's possible. Denver, definitely possible. Those are some that I just thought of off the top of my head. What could the Browns get for Myles Garrett? A lot. Definitely a first-round pick. What do you think the Titans can do by trading down? I think what the Titans would do if they trade down, they probably wouldn't be going after a quarterback. They would build the rest of the offensive line. Tackle is a huge priority for them, especially right tackle, and wide receiver could also be another one, as well as really anyone on the defense. The defense is good on paper. The defense was pretty good for a majority of the year, but you could always use more talent on that side of the ball as well. So I think they would probably look to trade down and get more assets, but I think tackle would probably be the main priority there if they did that. Thoughts on Milroe? Personally, from what I've seen, very athletic, can run really well, very concerned about his passing ability. I don't see a lot of precision, timing in his game. I do think he's got a lot of athletic traits that make him alluring or potentially intriguing to teams because he's got a good arm and he definitely can move and he can extend. But I think in terms of being a pocket passer, his accuracy, his ability to read coverages, there's a lot of concern there. He needs a lot of development. So he's probably more of a player that would land for me in a second round type of scenario, just because I don't think he necessarily has the refined quarterback game to be a first round pick. But that's just my opinion again. All right, let's get to the top 2. At number 2, I have the Tennessee Titans selecting quarterback Cam Ward out of the U. That's right. Cam Ward out of Miami would be the top quarterback selected, in my opinion. Now, the reason I think that Cam Ward will be, as of now, the top quarterback selected by the Tennessee Titans is he has the most gifted skill set. He's the most gifted thrower of the football in terms of power, in terms of arm strength. He has the most fluid movement, calm composure in the pocket, combined with a great arm. He can extend, he can run, he's athletic. And like I said earlier, that is what Lamar Jackson has. That's what Josh Allen has. That's what Patrick Mahomes has, that's that savvy to run, to create, right? Cam Ward, what I love about him most is the composure. I love his calmness. I love his just ability to kind of just be still in the pocket, make plays, just always feel like he's uplifting the team around him. I mean, this is a guy that made Miami relevant this year, which has not been easy to do lately. So yeah, he's a playmaker. He's an athletic specimen. That's why I think he'd go first. Could be wrong, of course. Could be wrong. We're very early in the process. Could be wrong here. But I think once teams compare him to Sanders and they look at him when it comes to the combine, and they look at how fast the ball comes out of his hand, and they watch him run, and they watch the tape, and they get really intrigued by the potential of coaching this kid up. I think there's a lot to like there, personally. He has a higher ceiling than Sanders. Sanders has a higher floor, okay? That's my opinion. That's why I have him at number 2. Now, when it comes to the Titans fit, it's interesting because you would think, Callahan is a Joe Burrow guy because he was in Cincinnati. But I don't think that necessarily means he would pick Sanders just because he's, more of the precision passer. That could be the case. But I think a lot of franchises are just looking for a guy that can uplift their entire team. With the current state of the Titans offensive line, with the current state of the Titans weaponry, they want a guy that can be a weapon himself. So that's why I went with Cam Ward out of Miami to the Titans. At number 1, my New England Patriots currently hold the first overall pick. And as a fan, I would personally love them to trade this pick because I want to get as many assets around Drake May, as many blue chips around Drake May as possible. Tackles, wide receivers, especially, and pass rushers. But if I had to stick and pick, I would select Travis Hunter. He's the best player in college football. He's been the best NFL prospect since high school. He's played at an elite level in college at 2 positions, corner and wide receiver, which gives him ultimate versatility, but also ultimate floor. I mean, he could rather be great at corner, which I think maybe he's more refined at that position, or he could be a phenomenal receiver. So either way, you have yourself a Drake May number 1 target, or you have Christian Gonzalez's running mate that could lock down receivers and offenses for years to come, which would be extremely intriguing. On top of that, New England, the Patriot way, has always been known for toughness, for versatility, for intelligence on the football field. Hunter possesses all 3 of those traits. And you think about Troy Brown, who played wide receiver and corner for the Patriots. Julian Edelman, who played wide receiver and corner and kick returner and all that stuff. You think of Mike Vrabel playing edge rusher, linebacker, and tight end. You think of the versatility of the Patriots lineage. Travis Hunter also fits that identity. And at the end of the day, the Patriots need a playmaker. They need a baller. They need a superstar. And Drake May needs some help. And I think Travis Hunter could provide that. In terms of his skill set, I think he could be a lockdown corner with his technique. His ball skills are off the charts, both on offense and defense. He has effortless yak ability. He's a phenomenal athlete. He's got good height to be a wide receiver or a really good height for a corner. And I would say, he's just a dog at the end of the day. On the field, he's just a dog. It's hard to describe how difficult what he has achieved at the college level, is. So he, at the college level, he's one of the greatest college players of all time when you consider what he's done, when you consider the snaps he's played, when you consider the level he's played at wide receiver and cornerback. So a comparison, I think I more so look at him as a wide receiver that really thrives off his ball skills. I think he's a good route runner, but could use some work in that regard. I think he's a ball skills guy that has great yak ability. I'm not sure who that would exactly be. And at corner, who would be a comparison at corner? I think that's kind of tough to say. Yeah, I don't have one at the top of my mind, but I'll think of one for sure. But obviously he's been taught by Deion Sanders. He's not Deion Sanders in terms of a corner. I wish. You know, ideally, Patriots fans get Deion Sanders and Randy Moss in one person. That would be phenomenal. But, you know, I have him at number 1 because I think he's got the highest floor. He's the best prospect. He's the best player in the draft. And if the Patriots had to pick, they would pick Travis Hunter because he could be a great receiver or a great corner. There it is, guys. John says we have the most money to spend in free agency. Yes, we do. So that's interesting just to throw that into the combination of Travis Hunter here. So the Patriots need a lot of things. I think they need to focus at wide receiver in free agency. If they can get a guy like T. Higgins, that would be ideal. It's going to be difficult. Offensive line, they need to fulfill some sort of floor on the offensive line, specifically the interior of the offensive line, left guard. But their tackle situation is really bad. I'm not exactly sure who the free agents are at that position, but I'd throw money at a left tackle if I could. And pass rusher is low-key a big need for the Patriots. I don't know if you guys watched the Charger game. They barely even touched Justin Herbert. So they need to address edge rusher, tackle, wide receiver, 3 big ticket items in free agency for sure. They have a ton of money to spend. But I think if the thing about the Patriots is that's very intriguing is what do they decide to do with Gerard Mayo? Second is you have a quarterback that I think could be great as soon as next year. That makes you a team that can turn around in a hurry, but you need to give them support. You need to give them a number 1 receiver. You need to give them protection, and you need to give them a defense that can help them out. And none of those things currently exist, right? That exists for Bo Nix. That exists for Caleb Williams, despite his struggles. And that exists for Jaden Daniels, but it does not exist for Drake May. And Drake May has looked great even in spite of that. So I'm extremely excited as a Patriots fan for the future, especially if we land this first pick. My preferred option would be to trade it, but I would also love Hunter. And I think the Patriots could actually trade, let's say with the Titans or the Giants, trade to 2 or 4 and still land Hunter. That's very possible at the end of the day because of the position that he plays and because of the lack of understanding of is he a receiver or is he a corner. So I think they could still land him at 4. To be honest with you, maybe I'm crazy, but that's just my opinion. Reese says the Jets need Mason Graham. We called them the monsters in the middle. I don't really see that just because Quinnen Williams is such a stud. I don't necessarily think that would be the way they go, considering they have so many different holes. Like they have wide receiver potentially, tackle potentially, quarterback obviously. Offensive holes are more important. I think their defense is very talented even still going into next year. They have to answer the Sauce Gardner question, but to me, that defense still has a lot of talent, and it's going to come down to coaching to get the most out of it. Miller says that's what I would do, to be honest. Not a lot of free agent linemen. Staley from the Ravens. I'd love Staley. Staley's great. You just have to worry about his availability. How low would the Patriots trade down to? That's a good question. I think they would try to stay inside the top 10. I don't think they would trade outside the top 10. Afro Man says the Pats should try to trade down 1 to 2 spots and still get Hunter. I agree with that. That would be the ideal situation. I also wouldn't mind McMillan myself. Like if you could get like a crazy haul from the Raiders at 8 and you could still get McMillan at 8, or you could get maybe Banks at 8 and you could get multiple first round picks. I would consider that as well. Because at the end of the day, guys, like the first pick, if you have Drake May, he's your guy. You don't need the first pick. That's just my opinion on things. Like the first pick is reserved for quarterback in the modern NFL. Teams are going to be wanting that pick for the quarterback. Is Mitch Palooza still sponsored by Speaker City? I believe so, but I'll have to check in on seeing about the 2025 prospects. T. Higgins to the Pats. We talked about that a little bit. I think that would be a great fit with Drake May. Drake May throws a great jump ball. Drake May throws great deep down the field. I think that would be a great fit. Do I think the Titans could trade up to 1? Absolutely. Raiders trade up for Cam Ward. Very possible. Will Sanders be better than Ward? Maybe. I think Ward right now, but again, guys, I don't really do my deep dive of game-to-game film, and then I do my YouTube videos until March, really like February, March, because I cover the NFL every day. So I know these prospects based on my TV scouting and based on the reputation of the players and who kind of wows me and what I see, but I don't necessarily like dive into the film. I've watched more of Ward and Sanders just to be prepared for these type of topics, but not to the level of like I broke down Drake May last year, made an entire video describing why I loved him so much. Breaking down Jaden Daniels or Caleb Williams. That will come eventually. And then I'll have like my real opinion of like stamped and loaded of like, yes, I'm a Drake May guy, or I'm a Josh Allen guy like I was, or I'm a once upon a time I was a Zach Wilson guy, which didn't work out, but none of those quarterbacks worked out, did they? I don't know. So I've been right, I've been wrong, but yeah. Yankee says, keep them coming. We want a mock draft once a week. That's on Bleacher Report, man. I'm not in charge here, but we'll see. Pats were demolished and demoralized this weekend. Need line help, wide receiver as well as linebacker. Jawan Bentley coming back will definitely help linebacker. Linebacker is a low-key need, but I don't think that's high up the list. I think that's probably like number 5. I think the Patriots defense needs a better coach. That's what I think. I think the defense, when you look at it last year and you look at it this year, there's one thing that's missing: the coach. Is this considered a strong draft class? No. Will the Pats sit May? I doubt it. I wish. I doubt it. All right, guys. I think I should end it. Gone a little bit over now. So I appreciate everybody tuning in. It's been Mitch. You can find me on the Bottom Line View on YouTube. If you guys like my presence here on camera, you enjoy this content, man. I break down all 32 teams in depth. I give out picks. We do crazy free agency breakdowns, draft breakdowns, all that sort of stuff on YouTube as well. So if you want to subscribe over there on YouTube, The Bottom Line View is the name. Go check it out. Thank you guys so much for watching. It's Mitch, and we'll see you soon. Peace.